Okay, well, good morning, everybody, or good evening, wherever you are. And thanks for coming. This is the fourth of the series of 4 intro classes for this last month that I've been honored to lead. It's been fun. Before I get started, any questions about anything that's happened in the first 3 weeks for any of you who have been here last week? I can't believe I was so incredibly clear that nobody has a question.
You're in shock.
All right, well, that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about today, which is clarity. And clarity in normal life is different than clarity in Zen. In normal life, clarity means that we're clear about a particular topic or our opinion about this or that, or on how clear we are on how to do our job, things like that. But in Zen, clarity actually doesn't mean that at all. It means to be clear of concepts, to be and that clarity is basically understanding that everything that we think we're clear about in the relative world is false, because it's all delusion and illusion. And so any clarity that we think we have there is just another delusion. Okay, thank you. Bye. So, that's an interesting, I mean, this is the kind of the core of Zen, right? Is like conceptual thought versus direct experience of the reality before us. And the admonition all the time in Zen practice is to, drop our dualistic thinking, our relative thinking, our conceptual thinking, and just experience the world as it is, because it's always there. It's always been there, it always will be there, and just the way it is. And all of the intellectual understanding or conceptual thoughts we have about that, and whatever clarity we think we have around that, is it just belongs to what Obaku calls the city of illusion, which I think is a nice kind of way to put it. And that the only way we can actually experience our lives and the world and the universe is to have a direct experience, and that is the Zen experience. And even the word Zen is not really relevant there. And I think this is the crucial thing in Zen, and of course Obaku is very clear about all the practices that you do, all the sutras you read, all the books by Thich Nhat Hanh or Pema Chodron or Genpo Roshi or anything else, is all just kind of a way to keep people interested and kind of lay some groundwork at least, but really none of that is going to get you there. No amount of meditation, no amount of chanting, no amount of big mind, no amount of conceptual thinking is going to elicit this true understanding. So it's like, wow, okay, well, how do I do it? If none of that works and none of that'll get you there, how am I to suddenly have this direct experience? Well, for one, you're already having it, you just don't recognize it. Okay. Because the world is there, and we're here, and there it is, and it's broadcasting itself all the time, 24/7. And it is just a matter of stopping your conceptual thinking to just sort of see that. I'm gonna let Isabella in here. And so this is the, in Zen, there were two schools basically that kind of sort of arose in China. One was like the gradual school of enlightenment, and one was the sudden school of enlightenment. And the gradual school said, well, you got to practice, 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 and then it'll happen. And this gradual school says, or then the sudden school says, well, yeah, you practice, 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 and then suddenly it happens. So, it's just another example of how people can look at things from two different angles, and they're both true, right? And but they're both partial, and yet, back to how do I do this thing? And I don't know. It's I know that koan practice is one of these practices that is there to kind of get you to drop your conceptual mind, sort of one koan at a time, and then one certain koan will just like really hit you that way. And of course, you start out with Mumon's Mu, or Joshu's Mu, actually, sorry. And you try to figure out what is Mu, what is Mu, what is Mu, and eventually you have to stop trying to figure it out, and you have to just, like they say, be the koan, be Mu. And I think, and every koan is this way. When they say, how do you stop the fighting across the river? You have to be the fighting across the river. And then suddenly the answer kind of appears, but it's not from figuring it out. Like that koan, how do you stop the fighting across the river? At first you're going to say, well, I'm going to call 911, or I'm going to go over there and pull people apart, or I'm going to, call the police, or I don't know, like some practical thing that we would normally answer a question like that with. But that's not the way the koan intends it. And each koan is intended to have you sort of like solve it, or from a non-conceptual way. So what is non-conceptual seeing? It's just allowing the raw data of sound and sight and hearing and smell and stuff just come in, and without you adding anything onto it, because it comes in before you add anything onto it. That's why I'm saying that you're experiencing it already. And yet, in an instant after seeing an object, we have named it and valued it and categorized it and put it away somewhere for further reference later in our memory. And it's not that these things are bad or wrong. It's just that that's the difference between dualistic thinking and non-dualistic thinking. And the Zen sort of life emerges out of being in non-dualistic thinking. It doesn't mean that you can never think dualistically again, but what it does is awakens you to what dualistic thinking is, and by that it loosens its hold on you. Okay, if we're totally trapped in dualistic thinking all the time, we're operating only from that side and not being informed by what's the wisdom that's available from the non-dualistic or non-conceptual life. So therefore it's partial, and it's fraught with errors. because it's delusion. But if you see it as delusion, then you can go, oh, okay, this is delusion. It might be useful delusion, might be helpful delusion, it might not. But if you see it for what it is, you're much better able to operate from a whole position, a non-partial position, one that sees impermanence, one that sees dependent arising, one that sees kind of how the world works and how cause and effect works, and the role that dualistic thinking plays. So we're not here to eliminate that entirely. We're here to have the whole truth and nothing but the truth, as they say, and not just operate from partial truth. Okay. So, and I think this is why a lot of times, well, let me put it this way. You know, when Roshi says you're already a Buddha, you just don't know it, or there's nothing to attain, it's because it's already there. It's not something that we have to go get, like a new job or a new boyfriend or a, you know, the things we go out and get and we think about trying to get and, you know, order our lives around getting those things. It's really a matter of dropping that side of it and just absorbing the wisdom that comes from dropping those things. So it's always there. You're already experiencing it. It's just a matter of, can you intercept your the gap between your direct experience and the application of your relative and dualistic thinking? Can you get in between there and operate from that place? Does that make sense? Because it does happen in sequential order. We see light and color before we say, oh, there's my pencil, or there's a hamburger, or whatever, you know. It's always there. So one of the reasons I think meditation has been very helpful with this is that by quiet sitting and practicing letting go and letting go and letting go, the mind will quiet down enough to where it'll just sort of drop away, and there you are, and you see the world as it is before conceptual thinking begins. And you may have a glimpse that way, or a couple of glimpses, or a deeper one, or, you know, on and on. But when that happens, it does happen kind of suddenly. So that's why I say this: the gradual school and the sudden school are both right. They're just both partial. I hope I'm not being too confusing by saying none of this works and then saying, but you got to do it anyway. But that's kind of the deal. And this is one of the many seeming paradoxes in Zen study that I think throws people a little bit sometimes. You know, I talked, I think a couple classes ago about, you know, the story of the Garden of Eden, you know, and which is a symbolic story that I think addresses this directly. When I'm not going to take it literally, okay, so but let's assume that God planted these two people in the Garden of Eden, and they had this, you know, had the tree of the knowledge of good and evil there, and he said, don't eat from that, it's just going to cause you a lot of trouble. And well, they went and did it anyway, and sure enough, it caused a lot of trouble. So this is, I think, you know, a Christian way of sort of pointing to the difference between non-dual thinking and dualistic thinking, that once someone falls into dualistic thinking by suddenly realizing, having the knowledge of good and evil, or up and down, or right and left, and, you know, all these things, then all of a sudden the world is completely immersed in the conflicts between these dualistic extremes. And there we go. So the idea is to get back to that pre-Garden of Eden thing, in order to gain that wisdom, and then having had the experience of dualistic thinking, you see how that plays a role as well, because ultimately it is all one thing. There is no absolute, there is no relative, it's all one thing, and yet dualistically we've divided it into relative and absolute, or dualistic and non-dualistic. So it can get very tangled up, but my point is that in Zen, our practice is to get back in touch with what's already there, and then it may not feel so spectacular. It'll feel very different, because when your dualistic thinking is dropped, then it's quite different, and yet the world is still the same, and so in a way it's quite ordinary and normal, and everything's fine, and not some huge explosion of fireworks necessarily. So the last little story about this I have is the story of the sixth patriarch, and I won't go into too much about his Dharma transmission, but he was a poor kid from the south of China who was gifted and already awakened, and came to the monastery, and was ultimately granted Dharma transmission and the successorship by the teacher there over the head monk, who could recite 35 sutras by heart and been teaching for a long time, and everybody thought he was going to be the successor. And when the fifth patriarch made the sixth patriarch his successor, he said, "You got to run, because these guys are coming after you." And he took off, and they did go after him, and the head monk finally cornered the sixth patriarch, and symbolically he gets the robe and bowl of the master who gave him Dharma transmission. And he finally corners him in the woods somewhere in China, and the sixth patriarch just puts the robe and the bowl on a big rock that's there. And he said, "Why are you chasing me?" And he said, "Have you come for the robe and bowl?" And the head monk, who was, thought he should have been the one, said, "I didn't come for the robe and bowl, I came for the Dharma." And the sixth patriarch said, "Well, then perhaps you should concentrate your mind and not think of good and evil." And it kind of shocked him, and he sat there and he said, "Now that you're not thinking of good and evil, who were you before your parents were born?" And this is not a thought that can be, it's not something that can be handled conceptually. It's a type of koan. And the head monk was suddenly shocked into dropping his dualistic thoughts, and he realized his error, and he looked back and he saw, like we do in Big Mind, he looked back at his self that was wanting this robe and bowl, and realizing that was just a delusion, and that what he really wanted was the Dharma. And now the sixth patriarch has handed this Dharma to him, and he was quite grateful and broke down and sobbed and told the sixth patriarch he'd be his teacher. But at that moment he had a sudden awakening. Now here's a guy who'd been working on the sutras his entire life, and could, had them memorized and everything, but it took this moment of sort of stress and confrontation and the sixth patriarch putting him in this position where he could not answer conceptually, that he finally had his sudden awakening. And Obaku calls it a tacit understanding, which basically means it's an understanding that's not spoken. It's a transmission, like they say, outside of words and letters, outside of conceptual thinking. Okay. So we study, we practice, we do all these things, but at some moment, we finally have to sort of let go with both hands. Okay, just drop your conceptual thinking. And this book I've been reading of Obaku is this. His Chinese name is Huang Po. You can read the first paragraph, and you don't even need to read the rest of the book, because he basically just says, be rid of your conceptual thinking and go about your life. And he doesn't say get rid of it forever. He says get rid of it in order to see, in order to have a tacit understanding, not an intellectual understanding, but a real direct experience and true Zen experience, and then go live your Zen life that way. Go and sin no more. So any questions or thoughts on that? It's pretty straightforward, but yeah, Tristan, Dine.
Yeah, what do you what do you think the role of studying like Wang Po, or I'm reading the Shoba Genzo? What's the role of reading words and letters and scriptures and stuff like that?
Well, there's such a vast Buddhist canon, right? I mean, there's hundreds of sutras, there's hundreds of books. I mean, if you go down to the local bookstore, how many books on Buddhism and Zen are there? And yet they all kind of say the same thing in different ways, right? And I think after a while, I can only speak for myself, but because I've read a ton of them, and I finally got to the point where it's like, this is getting boring. This is like, I keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, even Tristan, you remember this from Kanzeon, when we did service, twice a day, and we'd chant the identity of relative and absolute and the Heart Sutra, and those two things state this exact same thing plainly if you can see it. And the great way is not difficult. It just abhors picking and choosing. It's right there. And yet, and I'll admit to my own stupidity here, because 25 years I've been reading those kinds of things, and it's like, when do I finally get the point? When does it finally sink in that I'm chasing a wild goose here, and just be rid of my own dualistic thinking? And it's a slippery task, right? Because you can't make it happen. Like, the harder you try to make it happen, the more difficult it seems to be. But from the books you can pick up tips. You can. I mean, they say the same basic thing, and then they all give tips and how to's and steps to do it. Even the Eightfold Path is like, okay, here's your 8-step plan for enlightenment. And some of those we're all different, and we come from different backgrounds. We speak different languages, and we have different already tacit understandings of life. And so every once in a while, one of those books it'll say something a certain way, and you'll kind of get it, you'll kind of maybe even have that direct experience. But gee, it's a long haul, to go through all those books looking for little tidbits. I saw myself at one time, this was a kind of a big awakening of my own self. I realized, oh my God, I'm addicted to profound statements. Right. And I would go through books and I just like scan them as fast as I got to this point where it's like more and more and more, just like a heroin addict. Like I need a right, Brigida, right? And and it's like, oh, each one, oh, that was good. That was a good one. Where's the next one? Oh, that was really good. That'll last. Oh, I got to get right again. Where's my next fix? Okay. Oh, Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm going to burn through a bunch of Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm going to burn through Pema Chodron. I'm going to burn through Suzuki Roshi. I'm going to burn through Genpo Roshi. And it does sort of accumulate in a way, but still, man, that's a gradual school. I'm telling you. And yet, and the thing is the part of me that I realized it was getting sort of delighted by these was my conceptual mind. Because I could tell myself, oh, that was really cool. Oh, look at how cool I am that I get this, right? I mean, it's our self is very much has an addictive nature, right? To all sorts of things. The ego, I mean, just a physical body, right? And we were talking the other night, we were over Jenny's aunt and uncles, and they're like in their 80s, and they said, have you guys ever smoked marijuana? And we're like, well, yeah, and they're like, well, what's it like, and everything. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to go here. But I said, well, it's completely different than drinking and everything. And then Jenny goes, I had to stop smoking marijuana because every once in a while a friend of mine would give me some. And she goes, I would, whatever amount they gave me, I would smoke it till it was gone. Just like that, I wouldn't save any for later. I wouldn't save any for a special occasion. I would just like burn through it until it was gone. And then I'd go months without it, but when we got some, boom. And we were laughing about it, but it's just, this is how we are. It's just so crazy, and it doesn't have to be marijuana. It could be anything, right? It could be praise from someone we respect. It could be money. It can be status and position, name and fame. I mean, look at how many people are like hungry ghosting on social media, right? Do you guys know what hungry ghost is? I'm using okay, I'll just do a little mansplaining here for a second in case somebody doesn't. In the Buddhist, and this comes from Theravada and also Tibetan more than Zen, but there's different sort of statuses in life, and people can be in a hell realm, or they can be in God realm, or they can be all these kind of things. And one of them is hungry ghost, and the hungry ghost sort of represents greed. And the hungry ghost has this huge fat body and a giant mouth and a little tiny skinny neck. And it just is the side of us that wants to just shove stuff in our mouth, but it can't go down. And so it's always hungry. It's always gets caught in the throat. And anyway, that's, if you ever hear a hungry ghost again, that's kind of the analogy for it. But this is something that we struggle with, right? And we want to feel good all the time. And so how can we do that? And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche wrote that book, Spiritual Materialism, which directly addresses what I saw happen to me. And I of searching for more profound statements and new things that would kind of tickle my ego and my intellect. And I did the same thing. I burned through Ken Wilber, and it all belongs, like Obaku says, or Huang Po says, this all belongs to the city of illusion. Okay. You live in the city of illusion. I love that saying. And can you just step out? Can we just step out? And yeah, so one of the great things is, I think if you're meditating, if you want to meditate on something, there's these questions like, who am I, or what am I, things like that. You can meditate on stepping out. Have I stepped out? Can I step out? What does it mean to step out? And just take on a question like that, maybe. Look at your addictions. In Buddhism, we call them attachments. I think addiction's a little stronger word, but it's the same thing, really. Our attachments to the city of illusion. It even sounds like a beautiful city, doesn't it? like Arendelle or something.
Hey Bruce, we got a hand from Sam.
Oh, I do. Hi Sam, sorry. Are you there, man?
Hey, hello, how are you doing?
Good.
Good. I had a really profound experience of stepping out when we were discussing the no mind the other day. I
Yeah.
don't know if you were there,
I was there.
but the huge thing, it's not that I'm in the no mind or I can speak from this no mind voice. I just realized when I'm not in what I'm typically in from my day-to-day experience, and when I'm not in myself or what feels familiar, and I still can't get over how huge that is. Because there's teaching about like the 6 sense bases or the aggregates, and they say let go of the aggregates, or they say this and that in the books, but for some reason just coming from this no mind place lets me just see all of the selfing that happens and all that activity that I'm engaged in. It's still a revelation. I still can't even really quite put words to it. So
Yeah.
and I don't know about the different Zen masters and stuff, but I wonder if there's any that jump out to you about that, or I wonder if there's any, like there's certain Zen masters who are talking of the no mind school, and then there are certain ones of the mind only school, or what I don't really even have a particular question, but it's just so weird, all this Zen stuff.
Yeah. When you talk about mind only school or no mind school, you have to remember that these masters who talk this way were working on particular people at particular times, and each one was trying to trip up whoever was in front of them who was getting conceptual. And so they would say to the same person, 2 years apart, a monk would come to them and say, what is Buddha? And he'd say, mind is Buddha. And the monk would go back with that concept, right? And then 2 years later, he'd go to the master and say, what is Buddha? And no mind is Buddha. Because the point of it is to not let you stick to any concepts, because there are no concepts actually to hold on to. It's like we're trying to hold on to something that's unholdable. Okay. And even I took some notes actually the other day in that class, Sam, about no mind, because we sort of got into a little bit of thing there. I heard people getting into the thing of like, well, here's, speak from no mind and then look at the self. Well, there isn't a self. There isn't a no mind. There isn't a mind. There isn't a self. None of this is fixed. And as soon as we attempt to fix it, there springs forth the problem of dualistic thinking. And I remember one person said, it's like the ocean, it's the waves in the ocean. Well, the waves are no different than the ocean. The ocean is no different than the waves. Only you are thinking that. The ocean doesn't think that. The waves don't think that. As a matter of fact, there's no ocean or waves. It's all one massive thing that's just moving around and changing into all these, manifesting in all these different forms, and none of it can be clung to. And yet we make up words like ocean and waves, or mind and no mind, or self and other. There is no difference. Okay, this all is part of the city of illusion. There's no mind that's separate from self, and no self that's separate from mind. Okay, these are all concepts. I think a couple of weeks ago in Roshi's Sunday class, he was really going after people about that. He said, "What is Buddha? You know, what is Buddha, right?" And people were going, "Well, it's this and that." And he said, "No, that's a concept." And the next person, "Well, it's this and that." And, "Oh, no, that's a concept." And, he just kept on it for almost the whole talk. And he's right. Because it's just so easy to conceptualize something, and then we make it a thing, an object, and it's a delusion, it's an illusion, it's another shining object in the city of illusion.
Now I want to ask you about that Roshi class,
Yeah.
because I was sitting there and it felt almost like it was a method, like, what is Buddha? What is Buddha? You know, and he kept on asking, and he kept on getting us to go through stuff. And it's not so much for me like what was going on in that moment, but how that can invigorate my practice now to continue questioning. I wonder, does that kind of thing do something for you and invigorate you, like even now, or that you can take that with you or something? Or does that make sense? Like, does his and that method kind of invigorate you, or allow the Zen masters to come in a different way, or like shake up your understanding in a good way, so that you're still the same as you were, but now maybe it's from a slightly different vantage point or something like that, by him engaging in that way? Does that make sense?
I think what I would say, Sam, is that Zen masters who are really Zen masters, their only goal is to shake you out of dualistic thinking. And they're going to do it whatever the hell way they can. And they're going to do it continuously. And you may not even recognize it, which is why a lot of people say, "God, Zen masters are crazy," or they're like hard to understand, or what are they doing? It's because their only goal in life is to get you to drop your conceptual mind and see the world as it is, as it always has been, as it broadcasts to you 24/7, and just be there for a while and start to have some insight into this deep truth of impermanence and dependent arising and cause and effect. That this is the way things are, not the way we think it is.
In some senses, it feels like it gets worse for me because there's more activity going on, but I'm also, and it's not easy on a human level, but more aware of my selfing, and more like right now as I talk, I know I'm not truly there, authentic or something, but it's forcing me to confront that. So I appreciate that. And I don't know much about the Zen masters, but I wonder if they come alive for you in the dream and things. But I learned from Meg the other day, there's Daison questions, and then there's group questions. And maybe it's not time for me to ask, well, what is your dream about Zen, or show it to everybody or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't mean that.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't give much consideration to dreams really, but I have them, but I don't know what they are. But I just know that every time you read, Zen stories, or like you're reading the Shobo Genzo, right, Tristan? Know that they are trying to do something there, and it may not be what you think. Okay. Anyway, Meg has her hand up.
Thank you.
Sorry, my conceptual mind is engaged. You've used a couple of times the term dependent arising, which, I've heard a gazillion times and never, ever understood exactly what it was. So I don't know if you talked about this already, but would you mind just sort of even quickly going over what
Yeah.
you mean by that term?
Yeah, it's a fundamental, yeah, I think insight of the Buddha and others, but and I will explain it to you conceptually, but this is something that can be seen when you drop your conceptual thought. It can be seen clearly. But basically, it's very simple. It's like everything is made up of something else. And so no thing exists of itself. Okay, so I've got, let's see, I'll just pick an object here. Okay, I got a computer mouse, right? Okay, it's made of plastic and metal and some minerals, and I don't even know what's in there, right? When I call it a mouse, because that's what somebody came up with. They called it a mouse, I guess, because it originally had a wire coming out the back and it looked like a mouse, but it doesn't anymore. It looks more like a clam now. But so we name these things, but if I look at it, okay, the plastic, where did the plastic come from? Well, it came from oil. Where did oil come from? Well, it came from this or that. What's it made up of? It's made up of all the hydrocarbons, right? It's just chemistry, and the metal was dug out of the ground, and the ground, well, where did it come from? Well, when the universe created the earth, somehow aluminum and steel or iron and these basic elements were created, and so it's just that idea, Meg. It just, there's nothing that is a thing of itself. Everything is made up of other parts. In Ken Wilber's work, he calls it holons. That's the way he kind of describes. If you Google holons and Ken Wilber, you'll have a good description of it. But and so by seeing dependent arising, you realize there's nothing to cling to. That we're just giving names to all these objects that are made up of other things. And even Thich Nhat Hanh does a nice piece on it about a table. He goes, well, we call it a table, but it's wood and varnish and maybe some metal bolts in there. And these came, and not only are the elements, is everything made up of different elements, but he includes, quite rightly, the efforts of the people that built the table or cut down the tree or planted the tree, or the air that the tree, carbon dioxide that the tree breathed, and so it goes back to this: everything's connected,
Right.
and there's no individual objects that are fixed or have a permanent or abiding identity.
So when I use the term interconnectedness, is it the same? I mean, I guess
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether it's the same or similar, but it seems like that is part of it. Or Indra's net, right?
Yeah, Indra's net. It's been described a number of different ways. I use dependent arising because I don't know. I just go
It's
on
true.
down to that as a
It's
way
a
to say.
traditional term, but it's one of those terms, sort of like emptiness, that you hear and you go, "Ah." You can hear it a million times, but
Yeah.
you don't necessarily understand it or retain it.
Yeah. And the seeing into dependent arising, that things only arise depending on everything else, helps you to also see emptiness, because what that means is things are empty of any permanent, intrinsic, or abiding nature. That everything's changing, and so karma is the same way. If you look at cause and effect, they all steer you back to the same. They're all sort of different ways even to look at the same thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we have to include ourselves. It's kind of easy in a way to look at those kinds of things intellectually and go, well, yeah, that's the way things are out there. But that's the way things are in here too. And your thoughts and emotions and concepts and all these things are all part of it. Like, you can't have even your concepts are dependent. They're arising dependent on everything else, right? So that's why you can't cling to your concepts either. It's just a delusion, basically. And seeing that, I mean, some people think, oh my God, I can't go there because I'm going to fall into this void, this dark void of, I'm going to go crazy, whatever like that. But the actual effect is this incredible liberation and freedom from all that. And, that's where the joy is in this practice is dropping the baggage and it seems like there's always fear there, but that fear is dependently arising from our concepts and expectations about ourselves. All right. So yeah, anyway. Thank you, Meg. Yeah. Yeah, these when you go through reading particularly Zen stories and koan stories, there's all these things of well, Huang Po, this book, his teacher was Nansen, and Nansen cut the cat in half, right? That's one of the famous koans. His teacher was Nansen, and I have a cat, so I don't really want to cut my cat in half, but that story is great. I mean, Nansen, he comes back walking into the monastery, and a bunch of the junior monks are arguing over a cat for some reason, right? So there he sees before him the problem of dualistic thinking, because half the monks are saying one thing about the cat and half the monks are saying another about the cat. And so he decides to put on a little demonstration to shock these monks a little bit out of that. And so he grabs the cat and he says, if anybody can say a word of Zen, I will not cut this cat in half. And of course, immediately they forgot everything they were arguing about, and they're trying to figure out, whoa, what's a word of Zen, and what's and he's going to cut the cat in half, and what the hell, this is. I mean, he instantly had the skill to walk into a situation and completely shake it up, right, for the benefit of those monks, at the expense of the cat. But we don't know if it's a true story, but it's, even symbolically, it's very interesting because it points directly to the problem of dualistic thinking. It causes fights internally and externally. And, so none of them could say a word of Zen, and the koan is not about what is a word of Zen, but it is in the second half where he, I'm trying to remember. Anyway, Nansen's teacher comes in, and Nansen tells him the story, and his teacher puts a sandal up on top of his head and walks out the door. And Nansen says, if you'd been here, you would have saved the cat. So there's another thing where he's like, in that lesson, is like, why does putting a sandal on my head and walking away, why is that a word of Zen that would have saved the cat? All right. So these are all things to noodle on, but they all have the same goal, which is to get you to understand it outside of your conceptual thinking, and not really even understand it, just be it. Take on those roles. See yourself as those monks arguing. See yourself as nonsense. See yourself as the cat. See yourself from the perspective of his teacher that comes in and puts a sandal on his head. Be that koan. Be all the roles in that koan one at a time. Go through things like that. Don't try.
I wonder, Bruce, does it really matter that it was Joshu with Nansen? Like, does that, because it was with that one particular guy, does that change everything, perhaps? Because I wouldn't know. I wouldn't want to talk about it right now, especially, but I'm real curious if it matters too much. Like in the whole grand scheme of things.
There isn't a grand scheme, first of all. But let me just say that these koans and stories, they're like 2-minute moments in 80-year long lives. Okay, so they're not to be sort of strung together in that kind of way. They're just little moments that are snapshots of a skillful interaction, maybe between these people, that has kind of been recorded and is here for us to use as a way to get us out of our conceptual thinking. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah, I know I feel kind of one down with everybody who studied koans and who sat Zen or something like that, because I don't know the context of Joshu and this and that. And I feel like I'll always
you
be an
don't need to know the
outsider.
context. Actually, don't run off and try to get context. That's just another way to build up a concept around the whole thing.
Mhm.
Okay?
Interesting. This is different.
I know because I've done it, and I've seen how wrong, not how wrong it is, but how kind of a waste of time it is, to like memorize the names of all these. It's much more important to put yourself in the positions of the different people in these interactions.
Hmm.
It's just like, I know, Stam, you're working on, being locked in a stone grave, right?
Mhm.
Pretend like it's real. I mean, what would you actually do if that was really you? Make it real for yourself. That's what koans are about. So that's why I say, be one of the monks arguing about the cat, be the cat, be Nansen, be the, and it's like, well, what am I going to get out of doing all that? It's like, well, first of all, you're going to, be exposed to your own dualistic thinking and confront it, which is important. I think confronting ourselves is, and not taking ourselves so seriously in a way, or stuck. Somebody pointed out the other day, that many religions they go, okay, here's our book and here's the truth and that's it, no questioning. And in Zen, it's like, here's here's the Buddha's truth and here's all these writings, and question it. So the questioning is really important, and the answers are a problem because we stick to the answers, and then that becomes our new city of illusion. Michael Parrish, I see your hand up. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'm going to give you. I have very few jokes memorized, but I've got one for you.
Okay.
So on this theme, this is attributed to LBJ. I saw it in a book on Texas history, Texas jokes, but it basically said there are many towns in Texas that are too small to support one lawyer, but there are no towns in Texas that are too small to support two.
That's good.
That's my contribution for the day. There's duality. There's duality.
All right.
You can always find something to get back and forth on. But yeah, I woke up feeling very unclear, muddied, goofy, whatever, upset. But I got rolled up into something in a project I was dealing with. So I just appreciate being able to just sit here with you guys for a few minutes and kind of be reminded that there are cats and that there are non-cats. So appreciate you.
Thank you, Michael. I enjoy doing these classes. We had some schedule mishaps, so I've done 2 of these in a row now, and we're supposed to be sharing them, but Alexandra was supposed to take this particular 4 weeks, and but she had a retreat and other things come up, and then Mark Conchi Roshi was supposed to take one, but then he had some family stuff come up, so I'm the fallback. You guys get the third string player here, so. Expect those folks to be back before too long.
You know, we're not buying that, right?
If so, third string is just fine.
All right. Well, thanks. I really enjoyed it. I enjoy you guys. Got a couple minutes left if there's any last questions, but if not, then thanks, Melissa. All right, then I'll let you go about your day and put the recording up. By the way, are you guys able to access the recordings as needed of these different things? They're kind of in a different spot now on the website. If you go under membership, you'll see it on the main menu. There's a drop down menu and it says membership or member recordings. And if you click there, it'll give you links, or you can go straight to the media archive and look in there. But anyway, let me know if there's any problem accessing things. That's about it, I guess. Oh, and we have a 2-day workshop on July 8th and 9th coming up that should be quite interesting with Genpo Roshi on the topic of money, which I think is an issue that there's a lot of fear and concepts and expectations around. So we're going to try to crack that nut there.
Okay.
All right.
Bravissimo.
Oh, and we're kind of off for the rest of the week because in the US it's 4th of July, our Independence Day, and we're going to celebrate for a few days. So we'll see you next weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Bruce, can I jump in for just a second?
Oh yeah, sure.
Not for everyone. It was just based on something Sam said. I'm not sure there is, quote unquote, a real difference between a dice sign question and an overall question. Don't take my word for it, in other words.
Well, it's interesting. I've never heard of something like that before. So it gave me some food for thought to sit with, you know.
Yeah, and my point was just, or whatever was prompting that was just, I don't know if other people are interested in this or if this is too off topic. So if we need to talk about it separately, tell me and I'll go away.
Well, you know, let that be a rule. Let that be a rule just overall for everyone. We'll set the public policy, because I've skirted the line and people have gotten me in trouble for reasons I don't understand, but I'll just take a beating and learn from it. And thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Bruce.
Bye. Thank you.
That's
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Isabella.
All right, see you, Bruce.